Hello, I'm Angel, and welcome to my channel. Today, I'm voting, or at least I hope to vote, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So let's get to it. On May 21, 1919, the United States House of Representatives passed the 19th Amendment, and 2 weeks later, the Senate followed. When Tennessee became the 36th state to ratify the amendment on August 18, 1920, the amendment was adopted. The 1920 election was the first time white women could vote for a president. I think it's important to point out that while the 19th Amendment is often seen as the one that made suffrage universal, women of color were, and largely still are, denied access to the ballot box, even after a century of voting laws have been enacted. Here are a few examples of some of those laws. The Snyder Act of 1924 admitted Native Americans born in the U.S. to full U.S. citizenship. Though the 15th Amendment passed in 1870 granted all U.S. citizens the right to vote regardless of race, it wasn't until the Snyder Act that Native Americans could enjoy the rights granted by this amendment. Even with the passing of this citizenship bill, Native Americans were still prevented from participating in elections because the Constitution left it up to the states to decide who has the right to vote. After the passage of the 1924 citizenship bill, it still took over 40 years for all 50 states to allow Native Americans to vote. Other legislation includes the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and subsequent legislation in 1970, 1975, and 1982, along with many other voting protections that were reaffirmed and strengthened. You may be wondering what prevents Americans from voting in their elections. Voting in the United States is not compulsory. We aren't legally required to vote. The days we vote are not holidays, and employers are not required and often don't give their employees time off to vote. It's culturally expected that those that want to vote will make time to do it on their own. In-person voting isn't always easy to do. Voters are assigned a voting location based on where they live. The number of voting locations, the distance of the physical location from the people assigned to use it, and even the number of machines at each location are all based on what elected officials in the county and state decide to use. Early voting, that is the amount of time the polls are open before the official election day, is also dependent upon the state. Voting by mail, also called absentee ballots, incidentally the only way I ever voted until today, is also up to the states to figure out. Only a handful of states vote 100% by mail. In 2020, the postmaster took steps to slow the movement of the nation's mail. Those on the political left felt it was an intentional move to delay ballots from reaching the election office. The right defends the postmaster's action by saying it's an effort to save the post office from economic disaster. With the current world situation, it's clear the postmaster knew that there were skyrocketing requests for absentee ballots and went forward with his plan to slow the mail. Congress stepped in and told him to knock it off until after the election. But has he? I don't know. Voter ID laws are also controversial in the United States, not because people don't have ID, but because of the limited kinds of ID that are listed as, quote, legitimate. The lists are also set up by the individual states. In 2020, a lawsuit that got a lot of attention came from North Dakota. A new law requiring street addresses was pushed by the state legislators. While seemingly harmless to most Euro-Americans because they live in towns and suburbs, it was targeting Native Americans for disenfranchisement. Many neighborhoods on reservations don't have street names or house numbers. Therefore, many of the residents use post office boxes. Eventually, the law was overturned. In America, we must pay for copies of documents like birth certificates, and we pay for the ID card. Nearly 15% of Ohioans live in poverty. The more time it takes to vote, the less likely people will do it, especially if they aren't incredibly excited about a candidate. In 2016, Ohio had a record turnout at 71% of the eligible population, and the state went to Trump, the conservative candidate and now 45th President of the United States. While America is marketed to the world as a democracy, it isn't. We live in a representative democracy, also known as a representative government, a type of democracy founded on the principle of elected officials representing a group of people. This was my first time voting in person, and I was ecstatic to be able to do it. I wish that every American citizen of voting age was able to do this, but they're not. If you want to learn more about voter suppression and how you can help fight for universal suffrage in the United States, the first link in the description box below will be to a site that provides you with more information. Please be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and here are 2 other videos I think you will enjoy. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.